I'm the Doctor of Politics, Dr. Love, and this is Lone Star Politics. We are talking about political miscreants, nonsense, politicians, all the things that affect you right here in Austin. I must first warn you that what I say is solely my opinion. It has nothing to do with the opinion of the KVRX, the City of Austin, the State of Texas, the United States of America, or the opinions of the United Nations, or the University of Texas for that matter. In fact, my opinion is probably contrary to all of those larger entities. In all likelihood, you probably agree with some, if not most, of what I say, but government agencies do not. Why? Because I encourage you to think. Now, the University of Texas likes that part, for sure. UT wants you to think, which is why they've been so kind as to have me here as a student for 5 years. So thank you to UT for admitting me twice to graduate school. Maybe this time I'll graduate and make something of myself. Of course I will. So, what is going on? I'll tell you what's going on. The Supreme Court is hearing the Fisher affirmative action case. Why is this important? The University of Texas, like most public universities in these United States, has a lower standard of admission for minority students. Another way to say that is that they take race into account when admitting students. Another way of saying it is that race can give you bonus points when applying. I'm white, let's say you're black. You and I have the same exact SAT scores, the same exact grades, we even went to the same school. Our essays are of the same quality. Imagine you apply to a school and I apply to the same school, and you get in and I don't because you're black. You get extra points because you're black. You get in and I don't. That is the situation right now. Frankly, I'm not concerned with enough white kids getting admitted into college. What I'm concerned about is there being enough diversity and the students being high quality enough to be able to finish their degrees once they attend college. Right now, the Supreme Court is hearing the Fisher case, which was from an admission case in Michigan. The University of Michigan denied a girl named Fisher admission to school and admitted a black student who had I believe a lower GPA and basically similar scores other than that. And she said that that is discrimination. This case has gone all the way to the Supreme Court and they heard arguments today. Last night, the student government at the University of Texas took action. In a previous session, student government voted to support the president and support the University of Texas in their position on the case, which is that the University of Texas greatly values diversity, will take steps towards promoting a diverse student campus, and that they choose to allow race to be a factor when admitting students. Basically, the University of Texas supports affirmative action. Many students on campus support affirmative action, and even more students likely do not support affirmative action. Now, who is right in this situation? I think that's unimportant. What is important to note is that we greatly need more diversity in all of our universities across the country, especially at our large state universities. We learn from those who are different from us. If I went to school with a bunch of people just like me, chances are I wouldn't learn much from them because we have similar experiences, and we learn from those that have different experiences. We learn from older people because they have experienced more than we have. We learn from people from different countries because their culture is different. A friend of mine is from China, and I sat down with her last weekend just to talk with her about Chinese culture. I'm taking a business class on international marketing, and we talked about how China is expanding into Africa. Millions of Chinese now live in Africa and are working as construction workers. setting up roads, building buildings, doing all kinds of stuff, building infrastructure in Africa. Chinese culture is expanding across the world, and I wanted to find out from her kind of some specifics on it. What do people do in China? What's it like? What do people value? And it was very interesting to me. I can't learn these things going to school with a bunch of people that are just like me. Diversity is essential to our education, and however we can get a diverse campus, I believe that's a good thing. You may disagree. You may think people should only be admitted based upon their merit. Maybe race shouldn't be a factor. Maybe sex shouldn't be a factor. But you know what? I want sex to be a factor because I don't want a campus only of men or only of women. I think we need some diversity amongst the sexes. Imagine if a campus were just all men or all women, just based upon blindly admitting people based upon scores. Wouldn't that be awful? That'd be terrible. Neither sex would be happy with that unless you are homosexual, and that's perfectly okay. But I think you'd probably want diversity on campus as well. If you're a homosexual, you wouldn't want the campus to be all men or all women. So this is a very interesting issue. And last night, student government voted to support the university's stance that we support affirmative action. Now this was a big controversy because some student government representatives did not feel comfortable supporting affirmative action when they believed that the student body in general does not support affirmative action. And I think they're right. I think in general the student body does not support affirmative action. That's just a guess. And I'm basing that guess based upon the fact that the majority of our campus is white, and that, unfortunately, a lot of the students on campus do not believe that diversity is of value. I'm really sorry that this is the case, and we have only to look at the recent events in West Campus to learn how much some people are really misguided regarding the value of diversity. Black students have been targeted for attacks in West Campus of bleach balloons. Students have been throwing water balloons filled with bleach at black students returning to their homes. This is just awful. And this shows a very deep problem of lack of tolerance and a lack of value for diversity on campus. When we allow students to harm and attack others, and yes, I think bleach is very harming. Just try sticking your hand in a bucket of bleach. But imagine having that thrown on your head and that spilling in your hair, getting on your face, potentially in your eyes. Very dangerous. So when these attacks are going on in West Campus, a place full of students, and a place where housing is very expensive. So these are not poor. These are not your more poor students. These are students with a little bit of money, or at least a little bit of backing from mommy and daddy. I lived there for 2 years, and it was a lot of fun. A lot of parties go on in West Campus. But it's sad that such opinions or such beliefs that it's okay to throw bleach on black students, that this exists today in 2012 at one of the most liberal universities in the state outside of Rice. My goodness, this is very sad to me. So last night, student government passed the resolution that says, we support affirmative action, we support the university, and we support President Powers in promoting diversity at the University of Texas. And right now, there are Longhorns on Capitol Hill talking about this issue. The Supreme Court case is hearing the case right now. It's a very, very big deal. So what else is going on? Well, if you follow the national or international news, something I don't cover too much, you'll notice that Europe is going to heck in a handbasket. My goodness, their banking system's falling apart. The euro is falling apart. It's not only Greece that needs bailing out, it's also Spain, Portugal, and Italy. France is not in great shape. It does not look good. And I, for one, am happy to see the European Union fail. I believe that when you try to get a world government, and the European Union was an attempt at beginning a world government, the idea of assembling a bunch of different countries under one government, that is a step towards world government. And that step is proving disastrous. You can't have one currency, the euro, for all these different economies. The economy in Spain is different than the economy in France, which is different than the economy in Germany. The idea that all the economies are connected because they have the same currency, that is disastrous when one economy is doing poorly and one economy is doing well. It takes away the effectiveness of monetary policy. If you believe that monetary policy can be effective, I believe the Federal Reserve has shown time and time again that monetary policy is decisively ineffective. I believe the central bank, the Federal Reserve of these United States, has only succeeded in causing inflation or recession. By expanding the money supply, the Federal Reserve decreases the value of your dollar. Just think about it. If there are $1 billion in circulation right now, and they expand the money supply to $2 billion, that cuts the value of your dollar in half, theoretically, because there are twice as many available. Just like if Toyota produces 2 million cars instead of 1 million, last year they sold 1 million, chances are they're going to have to sell those cars for less because there's going to be less demand because there's twice as many. Recession is what the Federal Reserve causes when they shrink the money supply. So, in order to shrink the money supply, they raise interest rates. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, it makes it less appealing for me, the investor, to invest my money in a business. It makes more sense for me to invest it in a bank where I get a higher rate of return on the interest. It also takes money out of the system by selling bonds. What the Federal Reserve does, it'll buy or sell bonds to either put dollars in circulation or take dollars out of circulation. So if they buy bonds, let's say you're a bank and you have $1 billion worth of bonds, which is government debt. I buy $1 billion of bonds from you and I give you $1 billion. That $1 billion goes out into the money supply. So that's how they expand the money supply, by buying bonds. The Federal Open Market Committee decides what to do with the interest rate and the money supply, and they decide to buy or sell bonds through large banks primarily, like J.P. Morgan, Chase, or Bank of America. Now let's say they want to decrease the money supply. They sell bonds then. They take in money. So you, the bank, gives me money, and I keep that money, and I don't put it into circulation, so I decrease the money supply. When you decrease the money supply, you slow down the economy and can cause a recession. So by operating in this way, the Federal Reserve either decreases the value of your dollar by expanding the money supply, or they put the brakes on the economy. They slow down the economy and can cause a recession by decreasing the money supply. This is the machine. This is the lever, system of levers. These are the only two actions the Federal Reserve can take to monkey with the economy, to, quote, create jobs. Now apply this to the European Union. You got like 20 different economies there, some doing well, some doing poorly, some doing really poorly, and all you can do is increase the money supply or decrease the money supply throughout the European Union. And depending on what country you're in, you may want them to do one thing or another. Maybe you want them to try to stimulate jobs by increasing the money supply. Maybe you want them to fight inflation by decreasing the money supply. Either way, all 20 countries don't agree on what they want, and as a result, the euro is failing and the European Union is falling apart. And we need to learn a valuable lesson from this failure, and that is that world government doesn't work, and international governments that supersede national sovereignty, do not work. Welcome back to Lone Star Politics right here on KVRX 91.7 FM. I'm the Doctor of Politics, Dr. Love, and you are listening to Lone Star Politics. So last half hour we discussed what's going on here at the University of Texas regarding the Fisher case, the affirmative action case that the Supreme Court is hearing right now. Now, the way the Supreme Court works is they hear a case, render a decision, and then they don't release that decision for many, many weeks. As you'll remember from the healthcare Supreme Court decision that they kept us in suspense for weeks. Why they do this, I don't know. Maybe it's to take time writing opinions, which are primarily written by by their legal aides, the clerks clerking for the Supreme Court. They write a lot of the opinions. So, we were just talking about why the European Union is falling apart, because it has various different economies that are doing poorly and destroying the euro, and how things are just getting all crazy over there. And we also talked about how the Federal Reserve either inflates the currency and steals value from those who currently hold dollars, which is most of us. I have a few dollars in my bank account, as I assume most of us do. I'm paid in dollars. KVRX pays me $0 a week to be here, but I'm here anyway. But they pay me in dollars. I'm paid for my Zumba class in dollars. Zumba is awesome, by the way. It's lots of fun if you like to exercise and dance. So the value of the dollar is very important to us. And when the Federal Reserve makes an announcement like, we will keep interest rates at 0% for the next 5 years, that's kind of scary to me. How do they know what's going to happen in 5 years, and what the economic situation is going to be like, and what the appropriate monetary policy is for 5 years from now? But in reality, this is what happened. Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, said 2 weeks ago that he would keep interest rates at 0% for several years. What is he thinking? Now, he hoped to encourage business investors then to borrow money and then try to create jobs and start new businesses, knowing that interest rates were low. When interest rates are low, I can borrow money cheap, and that's cheaper to start a business. So I have a great idea for a milkshake. My milkshake is very healthy. It's delicious. Everyone's going to want to buy it. And they're especially going to want to buy it when they find out it helps them lose weight. I need money to start this project. With interest rates low, theoretically, I'm more likely to borrow the money I need, start a business, create jobs, and this will help the economy. The problem with this is, with interest rates artificially low, meaning not determined by the market, without the Federal Reserve's meddling in this, the market would determine the interest rate, and banks would decide how cheaply they want to lend money and how much they will pay interest on your savings account. Right now, your savings account earns 0.05%, something like that. For every $100 you have, you get 5 cents in interest a year. Now, if interest rates were 5%, for every dollar you would get 5 cents. For every $100 you would get $5. But the interest rate is like 0.05. For every $100 you get 5 cents. So there's no point in keeping your money in a bank account to accumulate interest, because that does not keep up with the rate of inflation. According to the Federal Reserve, the rate of inflation is 3%. So in order for the bank to be a good place to hold your money and at least keep up with inflation, they would need to at least pay 3%. And in reality, inflation is much higher than that. The problem is, the way inflation is measured, the Federal Reserve does not take into account food prices or energy prices. Other big things are healthcare and education. Healthcare and education are rising much faster than 3%, as are food and energy prices. So the Consumer Price Index basically seems to deal with like clothes and electronics and automobiles. And maybe these things are rising at 3% a year. But food, energy, healthcare, these things are going up much faster. Education's going up like 10% a year. Just look at UT's tuition over the past 10 years. It's going up. So is healthcare. Now, the real problem with healthcare going up is that this makes us extremely vulnerable on a national level, because in the United States, we have Medicare. What is Medicare? Medicare is healthcare for the elderly. The elderly are living longer and longer. My grandmother died at 94 years of age, and this was about 5 years ago that she died. Imagine how long the baby boomers are going to live if my grandmother lives to be 94. My parents are baby boomers. They're in their 60s right now. Are they going to make it into their 90s? Probably. Can we afford to pay for people's health care from age 65 to age 95? Absolutely not. Right now, the federal government borrows 40 cents of every dollar it spends. Can you imagine running a business where you borrow 40 cents of every dollar? For fun, let's say we're a drug dealer. Let's say we deal in marijuana. Can you imagine? Let's say you buy $1,000 worth of marijuana. And in order to do that, you have to borrow $400. And then you sell that marijuana. And then you buy again. But for some reason, you're so incompetent and inept that you sell the marijuana at a price where, in order to buy more, you need to borrow 40% of what you're buying. So basically, if this was a transaction, you would buy $1,000 worth of marijuana and sell that $1,000 of marijuana for $600. And then you got to go back and borrow another $400 to buy that $1,000 again. So this is what the government's doing. The government is borrowing 40 cents of every dollar it spends. The government's not a business, I get that. But the government could be run efficiently like a business. The problem is the government is big, and people in the government like it being big because it gives them a job. Go to the Social Security office and ask them, hey, is there a way that we could run things more efficiently here and your job could be done? We could eliminate your job and it could be done by somebody else. Or maybe a machine could do both your jobs. Or maybe one person could do both your jobs. You think that's possible? See the reaction. And the reaction is perfectly legitimate and it's very human. Their reaction is fear and anger. People in the government fear change and fear improvement, innovation, and efficiency because it means jobs are going to disappear. Let me say that again. People in the government fear change, innovation, and increases in efficiency because when you employ these wonderful things, jobs disappear. Efficiency means that we do things more effectively with less effort. When you do that, you need fewer employees. That means people lose their jobs. And people in government are used to operating in a way, in most cases, where they don't think about innovating. They don't go to the boss and say, hey, I found a way that we can make things more efficient and you can fire half my coworkers because they're not needed anymore. People don't do that in government because if they do that, eventually they're going to find themselves out of a job. And nobody does that. That just doesn't make sense. Why would I look for a way to get rid of my own job? Kurt Vonnegut wrote a great book. It's one of his first books. I can't remember the name of it. About this very thing. It's called Player Piano. That's what it was. The idea is that human beings invent technology that takes away people's jobs. Like a player piano. Player piano is a piece of technology that gets rid of the need for human beings to be able to play piano to hear piano music. Now in reality, we still play piano because we like to play piano and we like to hear other people play piano. And player pianos are not that common. But the idea is that as we invent technology, we replace human capital with technological capital. That is, we replace human beings with technology that can do things cheaper and more efficiently with fewer errors. I think this is a beautiful thing because it decreases costs and frees up that person to do something else with their lives. I don't want to work at the Social Security office handing out checks. If a machine can do the job, that means I can do something else with my life. That's good for me, at least the way I think right now. I'm 30 without a family and without a whole lot of bills to pay. And so without anyone depending upon me for sustenance, for life, no wife and no kids, I can think in that manner. If I am 50 years old, I've been working at the Social Security office for 20 years, and I have a wife and I have children, I'm not thinking about ways to innovate the Social Security office so that way I can change jobs. If I'm working there and I have a wife and kids, if I'm 50 years old, I don't want to change jobs. I like job security. That's why I work for the government. Total job security. Why is it job security? Because the government doesn't change. The government does not become efficient. The government does not innovate. It does not change. It does not improve. It only grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And as a result, People who work for government for a very long period of time. They become settled in their jobs, comfortable, and they cease looking for ways to improve their job, if they ever looked for ways to improve their job. This is the exact opposite of business. I read a case about a healthcare company in Mexico. You're going to love this. This is great innovation. There was a doctor, a surgeon, who was tired of working in the medical profession in Mexico. The way it works in Mexico was that doctors were incentivized to do procedures. So, for example, if I come to the doctor and I have a broken foot, the doctor will earn a commission for operating on my foot. But if the doctor looks me over and sees that, oh my, I have, say I have a boil on my left arm, he could say, oh, well, that could be cancerous. We should do a biopsy on that. And let's say, this is a bump on my head. He said, oh, this could be a brain tumor. We should x-ray this. And he notices that my stomach growls. He said, oh, well, you might have acid reflux disease. We should do a test for that. He gets paid for each one of those tests, whether or not he thinks they're important. I'm not saying that doctors shouldn't run tests, and I'm not saying that all doctors think in this way, that they do procedures based upon how much money they earn. What I am saying is that the medical profession in Mexico was arranged so that doctors were like salesmen. The more procedures and tests they could sell you, the more money they made. This is similar to the United States in that doctors here are much more likely to perform cesarean sections than in Europe. In Europe, for example, cesarean sections I think are like 3% of births. In the United States, cesarean sections are 25% of births. 25% versus 3%. Who has healthier births? Europe. Isn't that amazing? We say that cesarean sections are really for the benefit of the mothers, but you see doctors are incentivized for whatever reason to do them here in the United States, and 25% of births are cesarean sections compared to Europe, which is only 3%. So it makes you wonder, why are doctors doing that? What is their motivation? Do they really think cesarean section is the best thing? Or are they thinking, I get paid more to do a cesarean section? I don't know what they're thinking. I'm not a doctor, and it varies by doctor. But it makes us question and wonder why. So what did this doctor do in Mexico? He said, enough with this incentivizing doctors to do unnecessary procedures. I'm going to provide health insurance at a clinic. It's going to be a flat rate. You pay me $1,000 a year. Actually, it was like 1,000 pesos. It was like $300 a year. And you can get unlimited services. Come in when you're feeling sick. We're going to treat you. We can treat you as much as you want. And doctors are paid a salary. Let me say that again. Doctors are paid a salary. Doesn't matter how many procedures you order. Doesn't matter how many tests you perform. You get paid whatever you get paid to provide the care that is needed for your patients. They're patients. They're not customers. They're not clients. They're patients. They come to you to get healed. And you as the doctor provide whatever's necessary to heal them. You don't order unnecessary tests. You're not paid any more for that. You only do what is in the best interest of the patient. And the patient comes in there as soon as they start getting sick. This is the great thing with preventative care. When you come in early, we catch diseases early, and we're more likely to treat you. In the United States, when you don't have health insurance, a lot of people wait until they get really sick, then they go to the emergency room, which is 10 times as expensive as it needs to be. For example, I was assaulted on 6th Street a couple of years ago, and I had to go to the emergency room to get my lip sewn up because I had a big gash in my lip. There were no doctor's offices open, so I couldn't really wait. Let me tell you how expensive it was. Just for the paramedics to hand me a packet of gauze to hold on my lip. This is literally all they did. They had me sign something that says I was refusing a ride to the hospital. They told me not to take the ride to the hospital because it was going to be too expensive. So thank you, paramedics, for telling me that. Guess how much they charged me for gauze? Go on, guess. $100. They charged me $100 to hand me gauze and tell me to go to the hospital. That's how much emergency medicine costs. And at the emergency room, they charged me $1,000 for 10 minutes with the doctor to sew up my lip and provide a little topical anesthetic. $1,000 for 10 minutes. What is that per hour that doctor makes, assuming the doctor took it all in? It's like $6,000 an hour. At that rate, he'd be making over $10 million. It's like $20 million a year. I know some of it went to the hospital, and some went to the nurse, and some went to pay for the butcher's paper that I sat on in the emergency room. Some of it went for the stitches, and some of it went for the Novocaine. But $1,000? Come on. That's what emergency medicine costs. It's really expensive. And when people don't have health insurance, they wait until they're super sick, go to the emergency room, rack up these enormous bills, and then they skip out on them because they can't pay them. They can't afford health insurance, so of course they can't afford the $1,000 or $10,000 hospital bills that they generate in the emergency room, because the emergency room is so darn expensive. So this man solved that problem in Mexico and said, hey, give me 1,000 pesos a year, come to my clinics around the country, and you can get as much treatment as you want. I'm going to pay my doctors on salary. They're only going to order the tests that they need. And my goodness, he's changed healthcare. His competition was the government healthcare and very expensive clinics where the rich people would go, and other inexpensive clinics. And my gosh, how awesome is that someone had the idea, a doctor innovated and said, you know what, medicine's being practiced the wrong way. We are incentivizing doctors to order tests that they don't need, and we're going to stop this by paying doctors a salary, saying you are healers, heal people that come in here. Don't try to rack up a bill. You're not a salesman. You're not trying to sell them treatments so that you can buy a BMW. You are here to heal people. That is your calling, that is your job, and that's what you're going to do. And people, insured people, when you're sick, come to the clinic. Treat that illness early. Let us discover that cancer early so we can fight it early so that you can live, and it costs a lot less to do. This is a great advancement in healthcare. So this is how business thinks. Business sees a problem and innovates. They provide a solution. Government doesn't think this way. Government sees lots of problems and throws money at it, or builds a different department. George Bush saw a problem in terrorism. What was his response? He built the Department of Homeland Security. He added levels of bureaucracy onto the already very bureaucratic Defense Department. He added more jobs to the Defense Department. That's what he did. He had more administrators. He said, this'll fix it. I'll add more paper pushers. That'll solve terrorism. That was his response. That's how government thinks. It thinks that the answer to every problem is more jobs, is more money. The answer is never innovation. The answer is never downsizing. The answer is never elimination. And it should be. It should be all those things most of the time. But government doesn't get rewarded for good behavior. They don't get rewarded for efficiency. And they don't get rewarded for downsizing. In fact, government gets rewarded for very little except handing out checks. When we get a check for the government, we say, yay, government, woo, thank you for the money. But that's it. So sadly, I don't see any way that government is going to innovate or become more efficient or more effective in the future when they're not incentivized to do so. Certainly those that work in government on a daily basis, that see all the problems. If I worked at the Social Security office, I promise you within a week, I could list you a dozen things that they do inefficiently, that they do wrong, that they could improve. But people who work there don't do that, and they don't take their problems to their supervisors, and their supervisors don't innovate because none of them want to lose their jobs. They like things the way they are, and they want to keep their job first and foremost. More so than, I'm not saying people in the government don't want to serve the people, because that's what they do. They do serve the people. People in the Social Security office serve those who collect Social Security. But I believe that their first priority is self-preservation, is maintaining their jobs. Just like politicians. What's the number one rule of a politician? Stay in office. Politicians don't want to do anything that will get them unelected. This is the sad truth of the matter. And as a result, politicians are very unwilling to go out on a limb and do what is right for the people, even if it might be unpopular. For example, raising taxes. When was the last time a politician said, I will raise taxes when I'm elected? I can't remember. When was the last time a president raised taxes? I believe it was Clinton. And he was able to do that because the economy was booming. You can raise taxes when the economy is just, this was the dot-com bubble. When you graduate college, people were throwing jobs at you. They're saying, please come work for my startup, work for my dot-com business, work for my technology business. We got jobs. You can read? Great, we'll hire you. Everybody had a job. It was amazing. The economy was booming. The stock market reached all-time highs. Bill Gates was projected to become the world's first trillionaire. Trillionaire! Imagine! That's what the projections were saying. This was the dot-com bubble. And he could raise taxes because nobody cared. Everyone was rolling in money. That was the last time taxes were raised. No one wants to raise taxes now because the economy is doing poorly and people are struggling with money. But we need to raise taxes to balance the budget. And we need to balance the budget because we are so far in debt, it is a threat to our national security. That's what Dr. LaVon Henry said from the Federal Reserve branch of Cincinnati, which is a part of the Cleveland Federal Reserve Branch Bank. When we owe so much money to China and Japan, it is very dangerous. We don't, who do you want to own your debt? Imagine you buy a house. You have to borrow money to pay for that house. Who do you want owning that debt? Do you want it to be a friendly person? Or do you want it to be a foreign nation who might not have your best interests in mind? As the Bible says, the debtor is enslaved by the lender. So the borrower is subservient to the lender. So theoretically, we are subservient to China. China owns our dollars. They invest in dollars. They hold dollars. They have our bonds. They have our government debt. This is not a position that I want to be in as someone who values a sovereign, strong, and prosperous United States. You are listening to Lone Star Politics right here on KVRX. I'm the Doctor of Politics, Dr. Love, and this is 91.7 KVRX. Welcome back to Lone Star Politics right here on KVRX 91.7. I'm the Doctor of Politics, Dr. Love. You are listening to Lone Star Politics. We've been talking about the Fisher case, affirmative action. Like it, love it or hate it. Affirmative action is the practice of the University of Texas. And last night, student government signed a resolution that says we support affirmative action here at the University of Texas. We support the stance of the University of Texas. And right now, the Supreme Court case is hearing oral arguments on the Fisher case. Fisher is a woman who applied to the University of Michigan, was denied admission. A black student with similar criteria, a similar resume, was admitted, and she filed suit. It's gone all the way up to the Supreme Court, and now we're waiting for who I consider bozos to figure that one out. If you read the Constitution of the United States, it's very clear on what powers the federal government does and does not have. Article 1 will tell you, Article 1, Section 8 will tell you the powers of Congress. Nowhere in Article 1, Section 8 does it say that the Congress has the right to require you to buy anything, has the right to require you to buy health insurance, or that Congress has the authority to regulate the healthcare industry at all. Nowhere can that be found. And yet, the Supreme Court has ruled that Obamacare is constitutional. It has ruled that the federal government can force you to buy health insurance. It has ruled that you no longer get to decide how to spend your money that's not paid in taxes, that you now must buy something, that you now must buy health insurance. You have no choice in the matter. We, the Congress, have decided it, and we, the Supreme Court, who have not read the Constitution and who clearly cannot read, have decided that we're going to allow Congress to do this. How is this possible? It boggles the mind. Now, some have said it is the Interstate Commerce Clause, that health care can cross state lines, therefore the government can regulate it. That's interesting. Maybe that would apply to people who have residences in multiple states. But what about me? I live in Texas. I don't have a residence anywhere else. I live in the center of the state. Most people who live in Texas have never left Texas. For those who don't cross state lines, tell me how the federal government gets to meddle in their health care over the Interstate Commerce Clause. Interstate commerce has to do with what's bought and sold across state lines. Really, the Interstate Commerce Clause was designed to allow free trade between the states. It didn't want the states taxing other states. So, for example, North Carolina grows tobacco. Let's say Mississippi makes whiskey. Mississippi didn't want North Carolina taxing their whiskey, and North Carolina didn't want Mississippi taxing their tobacco. So, Interstate Commerce Clause says federal government gets to regulate interstate commerce, which really means states don't tax each other. We are trying to free up trade so that we trade freely among the states without adding state tax to things that are imported in the state. Somehow, the federal government and the Supreme Court have twisted, contorted, and just absolutely demolished the meaning of the Interstate Commerce Clause and have taken it to mean anything bought or sold across state lines we get to regulate. Not even that. Anything bought or sold, period, that could be taken across state lines, that could affect interstate commerce, we're going to regulate. What does that mean? Anything that could affect interstate commerce. Well, geez, a snowstorm can regulate interstate commerce. Now the federal government gets to regulate the weather. Because if it rains, it means my delivery truck is going to be slower. Which means that that's going to affect commerce because it affects the rate of travel of goods. It means that if I have a garden and I grow food, I'm less likely to go to the store and buy as much food. This affects interstate commerce because we import some of our food from other states. Now, all of a sudden, the federal government thinks that they get to regulate my personal home garden because it could affect interstate commerce because I'm buying less at the grocery store. This is the logic of the Supreme Court. If the founding fathers wanted the federal government to regulate everything bought and sold in these United States, the Commerce Clause would simply say the federal government has the right to regulate everything bought and sold in these United States. But it does not say that. It says that they have the right to regulate interstate commerce and commerce between the Indian nations and foreign nations, which means it is meant to facilitate trade. It is not meant to regulate everything bought or sold. So you can see why I'm very upset about this, because the government, which seems to do nothing right, which does everything inefficiently, which costs us lots and lots of money, which refuses to innovate, which refuses to change for the better, they are taking on more and more responsibility as they choose to regulate more and more things that are outside their constitutional jurisdiction. Thank you for tuning in to Lone Star Politics. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I hope you have a wonderful, blessed day. I love you. You're beautiful. And thank you.